On today's show, what is the Houston Rockets timeline for a quote-unquote all-in move to elevate themselves into true championship contention mode? De'Aaron Fox versus Devin Booker, which is a better fit for this Houston Rockets team? Fred VanVleet's future and so much more. It's all coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Drop us a comment while you're there. Share your thoughts. Who would you prefer to see in a Rockets jersey? De'Aaron Fox? Devin Booker? Neither of them? Let me know in the YouTube comments. Also, subscribe to our daily Locked On Rockets newsletter. Would sincerely appreciate that. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. I teased up this episode last episode when we were talking about Rockets' realistic trade targets for this season, taking advantage of the mountain of expiring contracts that they have while not limiting future moves for a true kind of all-in move or a star-level move to elevate this team into true championship contention. And, you know, some of the names we talked about, Cam Johnson, Zach LaVine, John Collins, CJ McCollum, and all the different trade permutations that we talked about last episode, none of those trades would prevent the Rockets from star chasing or going after two of the stars that have been heavily linked to the Houston Rockets with interest that we're going to unpack and discuss in today's episode. De'Aaron Fox with the Sacramento Kings and Devin Booker with the Phoenix Suns. And so in this episode, we're going to kind of take a step back and zoom out a little bit and take a look at the Rockets' timeline, when a move for either of these two star players would take place, why these two star players are so high on the radar for the Rockets, and kind of just really unpacking. And we'll talk, you know, pros and cons of each one of them, who would be the better fit with this team, and then also how pursuing either one of these stars would impact the future of Fred VanVleet as well. So let's start with the fact that this Rockets team is in perfect position to pursue one of De'Aaron Fox or Devin Booker as early as this upcoming offseason. Now, it won't be at this trade deadline, so if you're getting all giddy and excited about the Rockets maybe making like a blockbuster move mid-season, it's not going to happen. And a big part of that is because the biggest Rockets trade chip that they have, in addition to, you know, the swath of young talent they have up and down the roster, names like Cam Whitmore and Sheppard, guys who aren't huge parts of the Rockets rotation but have a tremendous amount of upside and would definitely be pretty major assets in a trade for a star player, as well as all the future draft capital that they have. One of the biggest Rockets trade chips is the fact that they have Jaylen Green signed to a contract that is incredibly tradable. And that's a big thing. And I want to give a lot of credit to the Rockets front office because they could have gone a couple different ways with the Jaylen Green contract, two different ways, really. And Rafael Stone and company decided to open up a magical third door that basically put the Rockets in a really good position to, if Jaylen Green didn't turn into an all-star, a consistent all-star this season, to be able to include him in a trade for a potential star-level upgrade like a De'Aaron Fox or a Devin Booker. And I say that because, you know, the Rockets could have just given Jaylen Green a contract extension very similar to Alperen and Sengun's, you know, full rookie max, whatever, and then that's that, right? All she wrote. Or they could have sent him to restricted free agency. They could have sent him into year 4 and said, nope, we're not sure if March was real. Go out and prove it for an entire season. If you prove it, we'll ink you to a super big contract next offseason. So go earn that deal. And that's what a lot of people, myself included, thought would have been the best case scenario for Jaylen Green because he had been so inconsistent up to that point in his career. However, the Rockets opted to sign him to the deal that he did get, a very unique deal for a top draft pick, never seen before in NBA history. And what that deal has allowed them to do is it's going to allow the Rockets, if they need to trade Jaylen Green as early as this offseason. Because if he had gone to restricted free agency, then the earliest that the Rockets could have traded him, whether he played out of his mind and became an all-star and then they wanted to leverage his all-star play into a true like top 15, top 10 player, or just keep him, because if Jaylen Green is playing like an all-star, then this Rockets team would be the number one seed in the Western Conference. Like, if Jaylen Green was putting up Zach LaVine numbers, this Rockets team would be the number one seed in the Western Conference. So if they had sent him to restricted free agency and he was, inconsistent like he's been this season, or, maybe they think he's better in a six-man role, or you try to keep him on a team-friendly contract, whatever, the earliest you could have traded him would have been the 2026 NBA trade deadline. So it would have prevented you from factoring him into any potential star chasing this upcoming offseason. Instead, the way the contract is structured, Jaylen Green can be your salary ballast for a big star trade, because his contract extension kicks in this summer and he'll be making $33.3 million. So instead of having to factor in and include like Dillon Brooks, or find a way to, pick up Fred's team option and then use his $44.8 million salary, or again, using Dillon Brooks and his $21 million salary in order to aggregate all the money together and be able to match salaries for an incoming star player. Now you have Jaylen Green's contract to make that work. The contract is an enormous trade chip and has a ton of value when it's going to when it comes to pursuing one of these two star players that we're going to talk about, that the Houston Rockets are linked to and definitely interested in De'Aaron Fox and Devin Booker. So you factor in, a package that would basically, for either of these two guys, for either Fox or Booker, it would look something like Jaylen Green, Cam Whitmore, Reed Sheppard, and future draft capital. Whether it's, if you're talking with Phoenix, then it would be, giving back the Suns picks. If you're talking with the Kings, maybe it's still factoring in the Phoenix picks, but also some of your own picks potentially. The Rockets also still have that Brooklyn Nets swap to work with. The Rockets are in prime position to make a truly blockbuster level deal this upcoming summer for either of those two star players, or another star player if another one shakes loose. But one of the reasons that De'Aaron Fox and Devin Booker are so attractive and would be perfect fits for this Houston Rockets team is the recipe for success is readily apparent. When Fred or Jalen, or both, but when one of them plays like an all-star and is able to complement Alperen Sengun in the middle, this Rockets team looks good offensively. When Fred plays like an all-star and Alp's playing his consistent game in the middle and putting up, 22, 12, and 5, like, this Rockets team looks unbeatable because they package those two players, a premier elite guard playing like an all-star, plus their elite big man in the middle in Alperen Sengun, and then a top 2, top 3 defense. That's a contender right there. That's why the Rockets have looked so good through stretches of the season. But the reason they've also looked so bad is because Fred and Jalen have been so wildly inconsistent. Fred's numbers are down across the board this year. And Jalen's had some really big games, but they've come against usually lesser opponents. And then in some of the bigger games, Jalen hasn't found a way to really be effective or score at the same level that he has against other teams. And so it's been a really inconsistent showing so far from the Rockets' backcourt this season. So to me, the recipe for success is so simple. If you find an elite lead guard for this Houston Rockets team, and you throw them in the backcourt in place of one of, if not both, of Fred VanVleet or Jaylen Green, and then you have the Houston Rockets elite defense continues to do what it does, and Alperen Sengun continues to play like he does in the middle as an all-star, then this Rockets team becomes a contender overnight. And that's why it's so exciting. This Rockets team really is one move away, one piece away, one really all-in move away from being legitimate contenders, being a part of the legitimate title conversation in the NBA. And you might be sitting there thinking the Rockets don't need either of those guys. They just need to be patient. They need to let guys grow and develop and give Jaylen Green more time, or maybe they need to factor in Cam Whitmore and let him play, or give Reed Sheppard time. The issue is, and we talked about this a little bit last episode, this Rockets team is ready to win games right now. Ime Udoka wants to win games right now. Sengun, Fred, Dillon, Jabari, Tari, Amin. They're all ready to win games right now at this moment. So there's no need, there's no reason to wait. There's no need to say, oh, they just need 1 or 2 more years to let the other guys develop and get accustomed to the NBA. No, there's a consolidation trade coming down the pipeline at some point for this Rockets team. And if the Rockets make the right move when they consolidate all of their young pieces, again, it's unfortunate that Cam Whitmore and Reed Sheppard might be casualties of the Rockets' kind of accelerated rebuilding process. But if you're able to turn Jaylen Green, Cam Whitmore, and Reed Sheppard and a chunk of draft picks into a De'Aaron Fox or a Devin Booker, then you'd be ecstatic. And then this Rockets team becomes a legit contender overnight. So coming up, we're going to talk about De'Aaron Fox versus Devin Booker, who would be the better fit for this Houston Rockets team, as well as how does the pursuit of either one of these star players impact the future for Fred VanVleet. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Built Rewards. Look, if you're a renter, you need to listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Built, you can now earn points on rent payments just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with serious perks, and it's completely free to join. Earn valuable Built points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. Redeem points for flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 different hotels in their program, the possibilities are truly endless. Access unique experiences that are exclusive to Built members. Look, I wish I knew about Built back when I was still renting. It would have been awesome to be able to earn points on my rent payments. It's so easy to turn your rent into direct rewards. If you're already paying rent, why not make it work for you? Start earning points on your rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnba. That's joinbuilt.com/lockedonnba. Make sure to use our link so that they know that we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Look, if you're trying to buy tickets to a Rockets game, go get them on Game Time. It's the best ticket buying experience on the marketplace. They filter out the fluff to only show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of different ticketing offers. But it's not just sports. They've got you covered for concerts, theater events, whatever's happening near you. Game Time has the tickets. They've also got so many amazing features. Their Game Time ticket covers, their lowest price guarantee, views from your seat so you know exactly what to expect when you get to your venue. My personal favorite is their all-in pricing. When you download the Game Time app, you toggle on the all-in pricing feature. They're fully transparent from start to finish. They don't hit you with any of those hidden fees along the way or any of that stuff. It's awesome. Take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, let's focus in this segment on Devin Booker first. We'll get to De'Aaron Fox next, and we'll kind of weigh the pros and cons and what each of these guys would bring to the table for this Houston Rockets team. So first and foremost, there are reasons that we're talking about both of these names as potential targets for the Houston Rockets. It's not just, la la land fairy tale. Oh, it'd be great to pluck this star off of this team. Both the Kings and the Suns are in very precarious situations as far as their standings in the Western Conference, their level of competition, and whether or not those teams are close to or near the imploding area of needing to hit a major reset button. So looking at the status of the Phoenix Suns, they've largely kind of underperformed this season. Obviously, the Suns are very much in championship or bust mode at this point. But you go look at the NBA standings, and they're not too far off. They're kind of performing about how they did last year, right? Floating around the 6th seed. They've dealt with some injuries this season. KD's missed some significant time. Devin Booker has wildly underperformed without Kevin Durant this season, and that's kind of one of the downsides that I'll talk about here in just a moment. But as it stands, Phoenix has a 35-year-old, 36-year-old Kevin Durant on the roster. They've got Bradley Beal, who is easily one of the worst contracts in the NBA with a no-trade clause baked into it for the next 3 seasons, making $50 million plus. Devin Booker is, still under contract for the next 4 years, but he's one of the silver linings that they got going for them. And then they've got this hodgepodge of a supporting cast that just isn't great around those guys, the Suns are not in a great spot. And if they don't really make a significant push this year with Budenholzer as their new head coach, if they don't make some noise in the Western Conference, then it's a very realistic possibility that you could easily see Devin Booker requesting a trade, asking out. You could see them, they're already entertaining trades, trying to figure out a way to get Bradley Beal out of Phoenix in order to pick up Jimmy Butler, but they would need Beal to waive his no trade clause. And Kevin Durant there's been speculation about him being included in trade talks. He's only got one more year under contract after this season. There's so much going against the Phoenix Suns right now. And they didn't hit the ground running. They haven't had a strong start to their year. I think it's fair to say that they've underperformed relative to expectations. So you factor all that in. The Suns are in a really tough spot. And they may need to look to hit the reset button sooner rather than later. And guess who owns all the future Suns draft picks? It's the Houston Rockets. So the Rockets are in the same position that they were for years with the Brooklyn Nets by result of the James Harden trade, where the Nets ultimately decided, hey, okay, we're ready to bottom out. We're ready to be bad. And they were able to conduct a trade with the Houston Rockets in order to get their picks back. Now, we talked about doing trades for Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, all that stuff in the past. And ultimately, the Rockets decided to just trade the Nets picks back to Brooklyn in order to acquire the future Phoenix Suns picks. So basically kicking the can further down the road. And now instead of leveraging and holding the future of the Nets against themselves, they hold the future of the Phoenix Suns. So Phoenix really can't tank. They really can't bottom out unless they get their own picks back, which means they're going to have to deal with the Rockets. And the Rockets would love to get their hands on Devin Booker. So there you go. It's almost a perfect scenario where if Phoenix implodes, if things look bad, if they're getting ready to trade Kevin Durant, if they're going to try and move Bradley Beal, Phoenix really doesn't have ways to improve this current iteration of their roster. Their best bet, if they really did want to try to improve, is to move on from KD. And if they can get enough of a trade return for KD, then maybe they can put the pieces around Devin Booker to kind of retool and stay in a competitive window. However, Devin Booker in his career, outside of playing alongside Chris Paul and Kevin Durant, has really struggled in his career. And I mean, just this season alone, he's 1-9 when Kevin Durant doesn't play. Now, a big part of that is how the Suns are structured, and we can get into all those logistics, but I do really wonder how good by himself Devin Booker truly is. He's an all-star caliber player. He's an elite player. I just don't know if he's necessarily a floor-raising piece or a ceiling-raising type player. And look, the Rockets already have a pretty high floor with their top 2, top 3 level defense. With all the other pieces that they have, there's a reason the Rockets have played so well to start this season. They have a very high floor already as a team. What we're trying to figure out is how the Rockets can elevate their ceiling, how they can really turn into true contenders. So this, these concerns about Devin Booker that I'm airing here and his, record and the reflection of it without Chris Paul, without Kevin Durant, it might not ultimately matter because the Rockets would be bringing him in, and essentially imagine a Rockets team where they would have Devin Booker in place of Jaylen Green. That team is suddenly probably the best team in the Western Conference. It's potentially that simple. How would Devin Booker work alongside some of these Houston Rockets players? First off, his two-man game with Alperen and Sengun would be off the charts. His ability to run the offense and to be the lead ball handler in moments where Fred VanVleet has to sit on the bench would be totally fine. He'd be able to anchor potentially those second units. Ime could play with the rotations and figure stuff out. He'd also be a solid complement to Amin Thompson, right? I mean, that between Fred VanVleet, Devin Booker, and Amin Thompson, that would be an elite little kind of 3-guard rotation that the Rockets could be playing with. Not to mention the Rockets still have or would still retain in this hypothetical scenario the other elite wings that make the Rockets who they are in Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., and Tari Eason. You've still got Alperen and Sengun in the middle, and that's why we talked about the trade package there in segment 1. The most that you would be willing to probably put on the table for either of Devin Booker or De'Aaron Fox would be Jaylen Green, Cam Whitmore, Reed Sheppard, and then if you needed to factor in other pieces like Jock Landale's $8 million salary or Aaron Holiday's $4.9 million salary next season in order to make the money work in a trade, then you do that as well, and you figure out the rest of it afterwards. You flesh out the rest of the roster. You can go get an MLE candidate to be, a backup level guard, since you're going to get rid of potentially Reed Sheppard in this deal, and he's been largely this season your backup point guard. Him and Aaron Holiday at various points this season have been your spot backup guard minutes. So you can find somebody else to be your 9th or 10th man to fill up that spot. I think that Devin Booker would complement this Rockets team. His numbers this season, let's take a look. Where is he at this season? Devin Booker so far this year. Kind of a down year for Devin Booker, unfortunately, across the board. Only 35% from three, only 43.7% from the floor. Still shooting, phenomenal from the free throw line. He's still averaging 25 points per contest, 3.7 rebounds, 6.4 assists. So still putting up all-star level numbers. His efficiency has just taken a little bit of a hit so far this season. And some of that might be, again, playing without Kevin Durant in all those games, right? It makes it a lot easier for teams to key in and hone in on Devin Booker and try to slow him down defensively. But there's also, again, I've got some reservations here about how good D-Book really is, because we really didn't see him elevate the Suns into championship contention mode until they traded for Chris Paul. It took Chris Paul being in Phoenix for Phoenix to become a winning basketball team. Now, maybe you make the argument that the Suns had like that stretch at the end of the 2019-2020 season in the Disney bubble where they played out of their mind and they just barely missed the playoffs. And, that was a really impressive stretch by Phoenix, and that happened all without Chris Paul. But adding Chris Paul to the mix elevated that Suns team, and then they turned Chris Paul into Bradley Beal. They turned Chris Paul and Devin Booker into, they added Kevin Durant to the mix, and then they got Bradley Beal. I don't know. Maybe the moves were just not the right moves for Phoenix. Maybe I'm holding too much stuff against Devin Booker here, but ultimately, it would be a massive upgrade for this Rockets team. I'm nitpicking here at this point. If you do a clean swap of Devin Booker for Jaylen Green, this Rockets team is a true contender. But I don't know if it's truly the best fit for this Rockets team. And I'll explain why here in our final segment where we talk about De'Aaron Fox and his fit with this team, as well as Fred VanVleet's future. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one spot. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you actually place your bets. Just go to FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. While you're on FanDuel, take a look at all the different odds available. Check out their parlay builder. Check out the different season leaders. Check out the outright favorites to win this year's Super Bowl. Right now, the Bills plus 450, the Eagles plus 480, the Chiefs right behind them at plus 500. So are the Lions, also plus 500, and the Ravens plus 800. So for all those odds and so much more, head on over to FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, De'Aaron Fox time. This is the guy that I think is truly the perfect complement to this Houston Rockets team. I think he's a better fit for this Rockets team than Devin Booker ultimately is. I think he's better for the future timeline of this Rockets team. And also, case in point, I highlighted the issues plaguing Phoenix right now. The issues plaguing Sacramento is Sacramento decided to make an all-in move for DeMar DeRozan, who did not fit their play style, their team identity whatsoever. The Kings, when they were the 3 seed in the West a few seasons ago, had an identity of this elite two-man game between De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, and just obscene levels of three-point shooting around those guys, right? That was their whole identity. They had Keegan Murray, they had Harrison Barnes, they had Malik Monk, they had Kevin Huerter. That was their team. And then they've since gotten away from that. Now, some of that is guys regressing, not shooting the ball as well, but DeMar DeRozan literally just doesn't shoot threes. And so, yeah, you added an all-star caliber player. You added one of the elite players in the NBA, albeit he's a little over the hill at 35 years old. But sometimes talent doesn't always win out. And maybe, DeMar DeRozan isn't the exclusive reason for the kind of struggles that the Kings have faced so far this year. Maybe it's other guys underperforming and whatnot. Maybe it's just the West has just gotten that much better. But at the end of the day, the Kings are struggling. And De'Aaron Fox was in line for a contract extension this past offseason and elected not to sign it. So he's only got 2 years left on his deal. He'll be going to the final year of his deal this upcoming season, and he'll be eligible to figure out his contract extension this upcoming offseason. But if Sacramento looks like they completely, not quite bottomed out, but if they struggle, if they're floating near the bottom of the Western Conference standings, in what world would De'Aaron Fox want to ink his contract extension in Sacramento? He'd be better off requesting a trade and asking to be sent elsewhere, somewhere that he could conceivably see himself competing at a very high level for the next few years as he enters the prime of his career. I didn't mention this when we were talking about Devin Booker. I should have. Booker is also a little bit older than Fox, right? Devin Booker's sitting on 28 right now. De'Aaron Fox is 26. So Fox is a little bit on the younger end of the spectrum. And that benefits the Rockets a little bit more, right? It gives them a little bit of a longer contention window if they go to pick up De'Aaron Fox instead of Devin Booker. And again, I do think the Kings are a little bit closer to, so far as this season looks, the Kings are closer to probably imploding than the Suns are. Because the Suns, the moment the Suns look to bottom out, right, the Suns do have to deal with the Rockets. That's the other benefit here is Phoenix basically has to reach out to Houston and talk about getting their picks back if they want to tank, if they want to bottom out, rather than trying to be a middling team or trying to retool around Devin Booker or whatever. If they trade KD, all that stuff. The Kings, unfortunately, they can deal with anybody. The Kings might not want to send De'Aaron Fox to Houston. They might want to send De'Aaron Fox to an Eastern Conference team. But we also are in the player empowerment era. Players have a lot of say in where they ultimately go. And all it would take is De'Aaron Fox saying, yeah, I'm not signing an extension anywhere else other than if you send me to the Houston Rockets. I want to go to Houston. I will sign an extension if I go to Houston. But otherwise, any team that trades for me, it might be a one-year rental. And that's the risk, right? That's the risk that Sacramento has to deal with is if De'Aaron Fox threatens to walk outright in free agency, then they need to get something of value back for him. But otherwise, he might just be a one-year rental, just like Kawhi Leonard was for the Toronto Raptors, where the Spurs sent him to Toronto, and Toronto took that bet, and it got them a title. But then he walked away in free agency, and it kind of stung, right? Where, like, if Kawhi had stayed in Toronto, then maybe the Raptors would have picked up another chip or two while he was there. But ultimately, he had his eyes and heart set on getting back to LA. So a lot of this, when you look at these potential star level moves, right, a lot of this is contingent on what the star player themselves ultimately wants. But as the Rockets have done so far this season, they've played out of their mind, right? They're going to as long as, barring any, knock on wood, significant injuries or anything out of their control happening, the Rockets are probably going to finish the season as a top 4, maybe at worst, like top 5, top 6 seed in the Western Conference. Their defense is going to hold up. That's going to be consistent throughout the year. And we haven't even seen this Rockets team play at its best because the offense has been so woefully inconsistent. But, the Rockets are marketing themselves incredibly well and putting themselves in a great position for advertising. Hey, if you come to Houston, we're that one piece away, right? Hey, De'Aaron, you could be that one piece away for us to be legitimate title contenders. And if De'Aaron Fox was on this Rockets team, this Rockets team plus De'Aaron Fox is already better than any version of the Sacramento Kings that has existed with De'Aaron Fox on that team. Alperen Sengun is a more dynamic big than Domantas Sabonis, right? He's not as one-dimensional offensively. He's got a little bit more variety to his offensive bag. I do think he's a better passer. Again, a lot of Domantas Sabonis assists are, off of just DHOs. They're not really like creative. Okay, I'm finding the defender. I'm collapsing the paint. I'm kicking it out to shooters. It's not really that kind of an assist that you're seeing from Domantas Sabonis. And again, the Rockets' biggest Achilles heel has been their inconsistent offensive play from their guards. De'Aaron Fox is one of the most clutch guards one of the most clutch players in the NBA. He's one of the best guards in the NBA. He can get downhill, and he's got an elite mid-range game. He can get downhill and get all the way to the rim. He is elite in the mid-range with his floater, with his pull-up game. You can imagine a two-man game between Alperen Sengun and De'Aaron Fox. And one of the issues right now is the two-man game between Fred VanVleet and Alperen Sengun, or Jaylen Green and Alperen Sengun. It suffers because even though Alperen Sengun has all this gravity as a roll man, going towards the rim or stopping and getting the ball in the short roll and making plays there, the defense isn't nearly as worried about Fred or Jalen, unfortunately. They're willing to let Jalen take shots from the perimeter because he's an inconsistent outside shooting threat, and Fred VanVleet really can't get downhill and finish at the rim very effectively, or even in the mid-range, so they're not really worried about him. They're really only worried about Fred, taking the three ball, so they just fight over the screen and they force Fred to try and get downhill. If you gave Alperen Sengun a truly dynamic elite guard like De'Aaron Fox to run his two-man game with, as well as all the other complementary pieces around those two guys, it would be insane to witness. The synergy between those two guys would be better than anything that we've seen between Fox and Sabonis, and the complementary pieces around them would be able to continue maintaining a top 2, top 3 defense. So, again, trade package, something like Jaylen Green, Cam Whitmore, Reed Sheppard. You potentially include some of the other fillers. Now, the difference here is De'Aaron Fox makes quite a bit less than Devin Booker does. And this is where things get really interesting, because you could also potentially entice the Sacramento Kings into including Kevin Huerter in a potential De'Aaron Fox deal. So if you're talking about bringing back De'Aaron Fox and Kevin Huerter, who are both, again, going into the final year of their contracts, or would be the final year of their contracts next season, if the Kings have to hit the reset button, if Fox demands out, whatever, the Rockets can be lined up right there with 3 prospects. Jaylen Green, who, maybe there's still some upside there. Maybe, it just isn't going to pan out. It's not going to work in Houston because he's not able to play to his strengths. He doesn't fit alongside Fred VanVleet. Maybe he needs the ball in his hands full time to be the most effective version of himself, what have you. There's still some value there, and maybe the Kings, don't even look at that value. Maybe he's just used from a contract perspective. You still have Cam Whitmore in there, who has tremendous upside as a scoring presence and as a player in this league. And then Reed Sheppard, who was just drafted 3rd overall, but again, is kind of a casualty of where the Rockets are at right now, how competitive they want to be right now, and the fact that they're not really ready to be able to give a guard like Reed Sheppard 30, 35 minutes a night to really learn and adapt and get accustomed to the pace of play at the NBA level and finding his shot and understanding how he can be effective as a guard in the NBA. That's a pretty enticing trade package, in addition to a mountain of draft picks that the Rockets could throw at the Sacramento Kings. So if you talk about bringing back De'Aaron Fox and Kevin Huerter, I mean, you could look at a future starting lineup for the Rockets of Fox. You throw a Min Thompson into that starting 2-guard spot. Still got Dillon Brooks. Still got Jabari Smith Jr. Still got Alperen Sengun. And off the bench, you're talking about Kevin Huerter, Tari Eason, and whatever additional other pieces the Rockets would be looking to go pick up in free agency, whatever's still left on the roster. If you didn't include Aaron Holiday, Jock Landale, what have you in this potential trade, I mean, that's a really, really, really strong top 7 of players. Kevin Huerter helps address the Rockets' shooting woes a little bit. And you factor all this in, and then you think about what ultimately happens with Fred VanVleet. And this is where I'll address this really quickly here at the end of the show. First and foremost, I've seen a lot of Rockets fans trying to throw Fred VanVleet into some of these trades, and I'll be completely honest, it would feel really dirty to throw Fred into a trade for Fox, for Booker, for Zach LaVine. Fred was a huge part of this Rockets turnaround. We can credit Ime Udoka all we want. We can credit the young guys getting better and playing, elevating their level of play. But Fred and Dillon deserve a ton of credit for instilling this new culture, bringing a winning identity to this Houston Rockets team. And it would just feel really dirty if after a season and a half or 2 years, the Rockets basically grab Fred and they're just like, you know what? All right, we're going to pick up your team option and we're going to throw you to the Wolves and we're going to send you to, a team that's looking to bottom out and tank and be bad. Thanks for the 2 years. Thanks for the culture, but get lost, buddy. Like, that's really rough. And I don't think that Rafael Stone would do that. That has not been his MO since he took over as the GM. He's very much valued his relationships with players and kind of doing right by players. The best case scenario would be the Rockets renegotiating Fred's contract and him turning down, or the Rockets turning down that team option that they have next year for Fred for $44.8 million, and then renegotiating a long-term deal that's team friendly, somewhere around 20 to 25 million a year for, 3 or 4 years or however long that you could get it. And then Fred, if it's the Devin Booker example, then Fred can continue to be your starting point guard. Or if you want to throw Amin Thompson into the starting lineup and bring Fred off the bench and have Amin and Devin Booker be your starting backcourt, that works. Or continue to bring Amin off the bench. If you go get De'Aaron Fox, hell, there's a world where you could start Fred VanVleet and De'Aaron Fox next to each other and still bring Amin Thompson off the bench. Although I wouldn't personally do that. I would love to see a backcourt of De'Aaron Fox and Amin Thompson working together, and the defensive synergy between starting Amin, Dillon Brooks, and Jabari Smith Jr. would be out of this world, honestly. There's a lot of different possibilities here, but I think the best future is the one where the Rockets are able to renegotiate Fred's deal, and he's able to be in a much smaller role where the expectations are drastically different, right? Where he's only expected to play, his 20-ish minutes a night off the bench, anchor the second unit. He's not expected to shoulder such a big offensive load because the Rockets would have other weapons. They would have a Devin Booker, or they would have a De'Aaron Fox to be able to be the number one option, the elite scoring option that this Rockets team so desperately is missing right now. And again, I'd love to see Fred stay in Houston long term. Yeah, he's been inconsistent this season. I think the numbers will probably bear out over the rest of the season. I think he'll probably regress to his usual averages. It's been a rough start to the year for him, but he is a good shooter, and he's a great important piece of this Houston Rockets locker room. Again, you don't get this Rockets turnaround. You don't get the success that they've had this season. You don't get to 41-41 last year and really start turning around the Houston Rockets and rehabilitating the image of the organization without Fred VanVleet, without his leadership, without everything that he's brought to the table. So cannot overstate how important he's been to this Houston Rockets team, and I do think it'd be important to try and keep him long-term, if possible, if you can make it work financially. But with all that said, I'm very curious your thoughts at the end of this episode. Who would you rather see the Rockets pursue? Would you rather see them go after Devin Booker? Would you rather see them go after De'Aaron Fox? Maybe you don't want to see them go after either of those guys. Maybe you want somebody like, I don't know, Brandon Ingram? I don't know. Let me know who you or what you think in the YouTube comments. Remember, the best way you can help us grow our shoes to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Drop us a comment while you're there. Subscribe to the daily Locked On Rockets newsletter. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.